I'm going to start just by asking you to explain within 30 seconds, more or less, what you do and your area of expertise within the remote healthcare space. Starting with you, Gilles.
Thank you. So I'm Gilles Lunzenfichter, and I'm the CEO of MediSanté. And we enable the hospital at home with global cellular IoT.
I'm going to start with you, Gilles, if that's all right. Your company, MediSanté, is on a mission to enable hospital at home. There are going to be some people here from the digital health space and some people just from the tech space. So perhaps you can explain what exactly the hospital at home is and perhaps how it's developed over the last 10 years or so.
Yes, thank you. So what happened is during the pandemic, in normal circumstances, elderly patients, doctors should have been able to collect their vital signs, especially the most at risk, but it didn't happen. So health IT systems at large were not able to collect IoT data from the most fragile patients. And basically this is the problem we address, and we want to address it worldwide, which means that's why we say we enable the hospital at home with global cellular IoT. And the whole idea is that to be inclusive, to be fair, which is the topic of the conference, we cannot assume that people between 70 and 90, who are typically the most people in need of telemonitoring, that they all have a smartphone, they are all digital savvy, that they are at the top of their capabilities, that they all have done Polytechnic in Barcelona, etc. Unfortunately, it's not the case, but they deserve that telemonitoring by healthcare professionals. And to make that possible, we believe as a company that healthcare professionals cannot rely on the consumer smartphone because it's too much of an assumption that all the prerequisites are given. And that's why we decided to bring the cellular connectivity with medical kits to the home. And the whole idea is that the device we bring to the home, like a blood pressure monitor, blood glucose monitor, weight scales, etc., the devices have two characteristics. The first one is they're always assigned to a patient in a compliant health IT system. So this is very important for privacy reasons and trust reasons, because it's a healthcare professional that trusts that device, that assigns it to a patient. And the second characteristic of the device is that one, the patient has it in hands, he has nothing to configure. So no download something, enter password something, tweak something else, update something else, nothing. If it's a weight scale, for instance, in the case of heart insufficient patients, he just stands on the weight scale and 10 seconds later, his data, his readings, go directly over a global cellular network via our cloud IoT platform, and it gets pushed in near real time to the screen of the doctor. And so this is really what we enable. And we believe it's all about the user experience in telemonitoring, because unlike when a patient is alone as a consumer, the doctor needs to be on board. So with us, it's very simple. The user experience is Mr. Jones, device 33, go home, 30 seconds onboarding. Okay, next. Patient, stand on the weight scale, boom. Okay, get it. And then the whole technical teams, that is very important, the health IT engineers, the biomedical engineers, the people of the logistics, they support this patient-doctor interaction. And they take care of privacy, of interoperability, of security, of all those aspects that are just the baseline of everything in healthcare. You cannot implement technologies if you make compromises on topics like inclusion, security, or privacy.
Inclusive and accessible.
Exactly.
So one-stop shop. And what kind of impact have you seen so far on health outcomes?
Well, the point is, in management, we used to say that if you measure things, you know what the outcome is. Right now, the healthcare system often does not measure things. We say hypertension is prevalent. Okay, where is the data? in what health IT system is it? So the point is we enable healthcare IT systems to measure the data. To give you an example, in France, we have one client. He's deployed in 10 hospitals to telemonitor heart insufficient patients. So 1,000 patients over 3 years. They collected 700,000 measurements about the weight to prevent decompensation, which is extremely dangerous for the patient. So there have been very clear outcomes like reduction in mortality, reduction in hospital readmissions, reduction in costs, and these led to the reimbursement by the French government, by the French health insurance, CNAM, Caisse Nationale d'Assurance Maladie, of the telemonitoring of heart insufficiency, just as an example, based on those outcomes that were validated in an experimentation phase, and the same experimentation happened in Germany. And now there is also reimbursement in Germany of telemonitoring of heart insufficient patients. So basically there is no reimbursement by the government if there is no validation of the outcomes before. And this happened in Europe over the last 5 years.
Great. So what is the ultimate goal then of Medisante, would you say?
Well, our goal is, our aspiration is to keep the device experience seamless and secure at scale in virtual care for all stakeholders involved, the doctor, the patient, the tech teams, the people in logistics, etc. And if this happens, the outcomes on the medical side are possible. If it's not, there will be no outcome because nobody will deploy devices that send data to health systems.
So what stage are you at the moment, and what stage do you expect to be in, say, 4, 5 or 10 years from now?
So I think that Europe is 5 years behind the USA. So the USA has introduced a reimbursement code for remote patient monitoring in January 2019. So we are February 2024. So 5 years behind. So I think that Europe, with the introduction of reimbursement policies, will be where the US is today. And I think today there are about 2 million people telemonitored in the category of age above 65, the people who usually no longer work in the US. And I think it will be similar in Europe. And we want to be the leader in Europe of IoT data collection in remote patient monitoring and decentralized clinical trials.
Yeah, and I know that in our chat last week, Gilles, you were saying that there are patients in Germany, for example, that are doing almost 100% self-monitoring in some cases.
Yes, so I see the technology in general around the devices. They are just a support to the patient-doctor interaction. It's not a replacement. I think that medicine will be more and more data-driven. And at the end of the day, the human body, it's a telemetry system. If the data is not good, the doctor has to do something. So really, I believe in this IoT data-driven approach. And just to give you an example, maybe also in the clinical trial space, we enabled the IoT data collection of a global, completely decentralized clinical trial by a biotech called George Medicines. And they told us we want to enroll 2,500 patients with a 3-in-1 pill against hypertension. And we want to enroll data subjects where there is no restriction whatsoever on inclusion based on social determinants of health. So send us 5 cellular IoT blood pressure monitors, and we will deploy them to real patients. And we don't tell you who they are and what their profile is, what their capabilities are they digital affine, do they have internet at home, yes, no. And basically they deployed as a test devices in Nigeria, in Sri Lanka, and in Australia. They didn't tell us where, and it just worked. So the data the patient with that profile, which was very basically no restriction on abilities, capabilities, technologies. He had to measure blood pressure, and the investigator wanted to collect this data across the world. And now, after 2 years and a half, they have finished the trial. They are wrapping it up and submitting it to FDA approval, and we're all crossing fingers and hope that this will potentially eradicate hypertension, especially in low and middle income countries where hypertension is still a huge cause of mortality, and it's called the silent killer. So we try to silence the silent killer with the 700,000 measurements we contributed to that clinical trial. And we realized also when the sponsor was doing this trial that it's not easy for them to do it, because basically the sponsors, the investigators, they are medical people. And at the end, what we do, we bring the technology piece of the puzzle, and it needs to come together. It's a little bit like tango dancing, you know. It needs to be harmonious. And but it was a very good experience, and I think that in general, people need to see things on an equal footing. You know, you have the doctors who are the experts of caring, and you have the technology guys who are the experts of technology, and it needs to fit together.
And how concerned are you all about ethical considerations, consent and the such like, as we move forward?
So we're obsessed by data privacy in our field, and to come back to the technology aspect, we decided to apply global technologies, but to apply them only on non-identifiable, non-PII, personally identifiable information. So basically, we always rely on a device assignment by a care team in a compliant platform. So the compliant platform meets all the regulations, and unfortunately, regulations in healthcare, there are as many as sand on the beach, right? So basically, we leave the compliance side on the healthcare side. So they assign device 33 to Mr. Jones, and then we just keep a connector where maybe they have assigned 10,000 devices to Mr. Jones's. We just keep the linkage of device 1 to 10,000, send data to the clinical system, let's say in New York or in Barcelona or in Paris. So we don't have personally identifiable information in our IoT cloud platform, and we deliver IoT data as a service, fully encrypted. All these IoT data in transit is fully encrypted, non-identifiable, and then as soon as it arrives, of course, Mr. Jones gets his readings as the owner of device 33, but we have no idea if device 33 is assigned to Mr. Jones or to Mrs. Cairns. You know, we just don't know. So I think it's very important to be extremely respectful of the privacy and the security aspects, and that's what we do. We don't want to make any compromise in this area, because otherwise the doctor will not adopt it.
We've only got around 3 minutes left, and I just want to touch on what the three of you really are most excited about in the next 4, 5, or 10 years from now in the remote healthcare space. And a final word to you, Gilles, what you're most excited about.
You know, we have an ambition, and I'm personally on a mission to enable IoT data as a service to doctors across Europe, instead of doing it as a nightmare or not at all. And I think we're on a good track, and the key will be the money, and we need to be very open about that. If there is no reimbursement, for instance, there is no telemonitoring, punto final. And in the pharma, it's a bit different, because the sponsors will come up with the funding, but in healthcare, it's very much driven by reimbursement policies.